So you may look at this and be like, Perspective, why in the hell are you reviewing such an old figure when there is an abundance of new figures to review right now? You're right, and this is where I would put those reviews of new figures, if I could find any. Hasbro is bad at making money. Hasbro is bad at putting their products in the hands of the people who want to buy them. And while Legacy Evolution Wave 2 seems to actually be a bright spot in their distribution, I am still having a hard time sourcing everything. So I figured while we wait, I could review something that I've been meaning to since before the start of my channel. Also, if you're wondering if I'm doing this because I just did Shockwave last time, and I'm doing an Empurata Buddies thing, yes. This is one of those figures that Thew convinced me to buy oh so long ago. And while I will say that Thew doesn't exactly have the best track record on recommendations, I mean, the guy is the literal nicest reviewer. I can count the number of figures he said are bad on one hand. So of course he's talked up some real stinkers and made me want them, and then made me regret getting them. This is not one of those instances. This guy's pretty good. It's Generations Whirl, a figure with a lot of jank, a lot of weird, a lot of frustration, a lot of concerns about breakages in the future, but is also really cool, unique, different, and fun. I bought this before I ever read IDW, as really my first exposure to the character, before I learned I'd kind of really hate the dude. Like, oh, tragic backstory, oh, weird, wacky, and funny, but also just kind of pure evil. Just a horrific sociopathic sadist who murders surrendered opponents, begging for their lives because he got bored, and will sacrifice his own crewmates' lives to settle a grudge. Like, I want to like the dude, I want to like blue space giant robot Deadpool, but I mean just, fuck this guy. Yes, I know he gets better. I read the whole comic, but first impressions mean everything. And it wasn't just a first impression, it was a second, and a third, a fourth, a fifth, and so on and on and on, until like 2/3 the way through all of his appearances. Like, this is the dude who beat Megatron into being evil, and later he tries to play the oh, woe is me card. I was forced into doing that. I could have prevented all this. But at the same time, based on what we know of him, he wouldn't actually want to, and he sure seemed to enjoy what he did for someone forced to do it. I guess you could say that I'm very conflicted on the character, which is just too bad because the toy is really cool. It doesn't look like his IDW appearance, but his G1 one. And honestly, I don't know which I prefer. Both are cool, both are very unique and interesting. However, I think that this one is a whole hell of a lot more doable, especially at a chug budget and a 2014 design sensibility. Like, some good stuff was made back then, and a lot of really bad stuff too. So props for this probably being one of the most successful designs from the era, especially considering what a freak this guy is. Though to be fair, the Bayverse was still in full swing at the time, so the designers were used to making freaks work. It's remarkable how clean he looks. Like, even the backpack isn't a heinous proposition. Though they really needed to find something better to do with the rotor. You can kind of sandwich it around the tail fin so it doesn't move, but it's not meant for this, so the connection is tenuous at best. Otherwise, this just kind of flops across his back like an extra long sausage slung over his shoulder. Is this a good observation? Probably not, but it is the kind of one you get from a guy trying to not rip off Jobby's bit of being too sexual. You might notice that I have the arms extended on their stalks, and there are 3 reasons for that. 1, I think it looks way cooler like this, as it's more in line with the character's weird-ass nature. 2, it is a bitch to get these in and out. If they wanted me to do this, then they should have planned on me doing it and made it doable. And 3, this is absolutely one of those brittle parts of the figure that will break if I'm not careful, like the legs famously also do, which are made out of the same black plastic as this. However, outside of that, quality is not a problem. I mean, that's like saying outside of splattering on the floor, jumping off a roof is not a problem, and it's really cool on the way down. But everything holds well, it feels good, it's even got some cool automatic claw action. That wouldn't be good for holding anything, but would be great for pinching the shit out of your enemies. Maybe this is the kind of quality that you get when Hasbro makes you do the work of putting on the auto badges yourself for some godforsaken reason. I will never stop being salty that this is offset on his chest, because instead of painting this on, they gave me a set of stickers and were like, you know better than us. Ah yes, that's what I want with my figures. Work! I want to go to the factory and assemble these fuckers for them. So far, I've spent most of my time bitching about the weird little aspects of this guy, and not enough about talking about the way this thing looks. But I mean, there are only so many ways that I can say that this guy is bizarre but cool looking. He looks like if Shockwave got anorexia. He looks like if Shockwave tried to splice himself with an insect, but somehow just didn't think to give himself a beast mode. He's a lanky mechanical nightmare who looks like he's intended to be a mid-boss in some near-future FPS, and if you lose, there's an animation where it stomps on your head, exploding it. I think I just described the Callisto Protocol. I am so sorry to have made you all remember that game exists. It's got Josh Duhamel in it, so it's weirdly relevant to us. The head is cool, but it's got some of the worst light piping I've ever fucking seen. Like, dear God, it pretty much might as well just be painted black. For some reason, they included this switch to turn off the light piping function, but 2 things. 1, that is the most superfluous thing I've ever seen, and 2, it makes the antenna look dumb, so it's not just that there's no point, the point is bad. As a kid, I always hated light piping, and as an adult, this is the thing that kind of clinched it as something that I needed to treat as a mortal enemy. Otherwise, it's just Shockwave's head again, ain't it? Pancaked out like someone stomped on it from the side. It will always be a cool head, there's just not a ton to say about it. This is a great looking, unique robot mode that you cannot mistake for anyone else, with solid QC, but a lot of potential breakage issues that stem from extraordinarily thin joints. It has a lot of charm and a lot of character, but it looks like the wrong version of the character to most people who would care. I personally think that both designs are cool, and honestly my biggest misgivings are about who the character is and not the figure itself. You know, outside the whole this could die in spectacular fashion thing. Accessories for this are many, but not amazing, to the point where I seem to have lost most of them and don't care. Outside of the sticker sheet, which I only applied like 2 of the stickers from, that then probably ended in the trash right after, this thing came with a whole slew of guns, the only 2 of which that I've kept on the figure being the minigun and the rocket pod. I don't know why the rocket pod is pinned when it doesn't bend or anything, and both of these are just cast in unpainted black plastic. You can mount them in only a couple of spots on the figure, ironically none of which being the hands, instead just going on the lower forearms, and one of the few ports available in robot mode is pretty useless unless you wanted to have a dongus. They can do stuff like clip onto the struts of the legs, but outside that, the only other one of these that I can remember is this like old-timey camera that you could slot over one of his hands. Honestly, these are some really boring accessories. They feel like they just came out of some generic G.I. Joe knockoffs blister card and were slapped into the box with this thing because value. I'm not offended that they gave us a bunch of generic weapons, it's just that these don't do anything for me, and they're too real-world human to feel like they can be handed out to Cybertronian figures. Like, is Optimus going to use a minigun or an ion blaster? Yeah, that's what I thought. Posability is devastatingly good, especially for a figure this old. Head has mountains more range than normal in all directions, with serious side-to-side and tilt up, and an extreme amount of tilt down. I mean, he's a taller dude, so I guess this is useful, but not that much taller than normal. Shoulders are on this weird bracket, which allows for a ton of up, and if you rotate that part independently, you can get a lot of forwards butterfly. Maximum elbows. Opening and closing claws, and even though it's cool that they work automatically, this does limit you. Like, you can't leave one of these extended and have the other retracted even if you want to do that. No waist, which, yeah, makes sense. Hips have an ungodly amount of range in all directions, and honestly, I think I'm going to have to call these maximum hips. Extreme intended mafia knees, and no feet that you think wouldn't allow him to stand easily, but they're so huge that it doesn't matter that they're basically double high heels. He's solid as a rock. So even without feet and a waist, this thing styles on almost anything you put it next to. It's better than the vast majority of modern chug. Hell, it's better than a huge amount of third party on the posing front. Way more range than is typical in all the joints he does have, and a few specialty joints. Obviously, you can't really hold the waist against him, considering that he's literally designed as a cockpit with legs sticking out of it. And I remind you that this was back in like 2014, so really impressive stuff. The transformation to Gerwalk mode is dumb, and the Gerwalk mode is dumb. Gerwalks are a fun thing to do yourself and to mess around with, but this being an official mode is kind of desperate. It's like, look, we made it do the thing! Aren't you happy? And I'm just sitting here like, I was gonna do the thing until you made it not cool anymore to do the thing, and now I don't wanna! I like the transformation a lot. It's extremely simple, and the backpack has its frustrations going into both modes, but I will say that his feet have got to be some of the most satisfying transformation joints I've ever handled. They just slide and click in a way that makes my stupid lizard brain happy. If the whole transformation was just this, then 10 out of 10 would die with a smile on my face. But the backpack drags it down to like an 8. Some of it isn't interesting enough, or it's the backpack and it sucks. So overall, pretty damn good. And then the end result is a pretty solid and very well balanced blue Apache helicopter. Or is this a Viper? Or are those the same thing? People complain that there are these gaps at the thighs, but they're a lot harder to notice in person, though they are for sure there. You can bend the legs at the double knee joints to try and fill these in some, but this is one of the more dangerous propositions of the figure, as this is the main area this thing is known to break. It looks pretty cool and cohesive, very much as the vibe of a real attack chopper, though you can't use the rotor for shit, one flick and it just collapses. This, much like Shockwave, rolls great. And you know what? For 2014, this was an absolute banger. I don't know why until I sat here and laid it all out, I kind of always thought this was a decent but not great figure. It just kind of gave off the vibe of, yeah, this is good and I like it, but it's not amazing or anything. But it is an awesome looking robot who looks like the G1 character if that's what you're looking for, though not like the IDW version that you are more likely to be after. But it doesn't take a lot of mental gymnastics to see him as that dude either way. He's built solid, and I can hope the stories of him breaking are exaggerated, but they do make me constantly concerned when handling this. The accessories are theoretically good, but uninspiring. The posability is fantastic, even by modern standards, with 2 missing bread and butter joints, but way more than enough to make up for it, a really fun transformation, and a really good alt mode. Outside the breakage risk, there is nothing to not love. It feels a little weird to slap this title on this figure, but I suppose you could call this a micro masterpiece. And that's not half what I have to say, but it's enough what I have to say. And I know, you know, what everyone else tells you to do at the end of these videos. So, if you liked what you saw here, please do that. And if you'd like to take it a step further, then please share this video with any friend you think may be interested. I hope you all enjoyed listening to me waste your time.